Hey everybody, it's Jay Lamb and Eric Rude. I'm reporting from the extended stay Gitmo today. Eric is back in Chicago, but we're going to talk about the Tony Swan Never Say Die Memorial at Gingerman. Who was Tony Swan? Well, Tony Swan was my friend, our friend, famous automotive journalist. He raced Lemons for years and years and years. He was an early adopter, and we love Tony. We decided to make this second Gingerman event every year a fundraising memorial for cancer. And with COVID, we couldn't do that, but we still left the name, and next year we'll start raising money for cancer in Tony's name. So one of the best things about this race is that Mary Sealhorse, Tony's widow, she always writes her own song and sings it for the driver's meeting and the trophy ceremony. Well, we couldn't do that either this year, so she did this instead.
Smoke, smoke, smoke that diesel truck. Smoke, 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 that guy behind you's out of luck. Just tell Judge Eric when you're black flagged in, bad smells are not a mortal sin, and you just gotta have another chance to suck.
Hella sweet at this race. Now, we've seen so many mediocre, classic, real racing themes over the years. You know, your Gulf liveries, your Martini and Rossi racing things. These guys took the right way to do this, which is to take the Red Lobster painted prototype from IMSA Racing in the 1980s. They put it on, of course, the March 83 spiritual successor, the Dodge Stealth, and brought it attempting to race. It did about as well as a Dodge Stealth would normally do. Now, one of the things we love about this is, again, it's not just a Gulf oil, and there's just this world of potential in crappy racing paint schemes. You know, something like Carrot Top on a 1-800-CALL-ATT themed NASCAR from the 1990s. So what other kinds of great paint schemes can you have in Lemons? Well, here's a few to choose from.
Hella sweet. Team Skid Steer, they brought a new Mercury Bobcat. I think if you've been racing an old Mercury Bobcat for a long time, you wouldn't do it again, but it's awesome that they did.
Longtime Lemons racers, Rust Belt Racing, brought their Toyota Celica. This is a car with the famous 20R indestructible Toyota engine. It failed even to start the race. Their second car, a Honda Civic Wago van, also failed to start the race. They went 0 for 2, which is not a great way to have a Lemons weekend. However, they did come out ahead. They sold the Celica to Melvin Wood, a Lemons racer who is traversing the country in his RV. He wanted a Class C car. They wanted to be rid of the Celica. Everybody wins.
But terrible and hella sweet, the number 97 Mustang. These guys came from Iowa and they drove their car from home all the way to the racetrack. We think that's super awesome. We're actually going to talk about that more in a little bit. So they got there, they failed tech spectacularly, spent pretty much the whole weekend trying to fix all that stuff, get to path safety tech. They finally did. They got out on track. The car was incredibly slow. However, they had the right spirit and they drove their car to the track. What's better than that?
Hella sweet at this race, this Pontiac Fiero. Now, all Pontiac Fieros, pretty great in Lemons. This one still had the original dashboard. It was mint. Hella sweet.
Hella sweet. I think this Volkswagen Caddy with an eBay Junkanasium turbocharger setup, I mean, it kind of chugged around. It blew smoke all weekend long, but they made it.
But terrible at this race, the League of Legitimate Nigerian Businessmen, who, by the way, have one of the greatest team names we've ever seen in Lemons. They brought their Subaru Legacy. They wanted to retheme it from the Queen paint scheme that they had in June at Gingerman. So naturally, they did this by scoring a couple gallons of municipal paint that they had found as surplus. It may have been mixed 15 years ago. It may have been mixed during the Carter administration. They weren't really sure. They tried to paint the car in their paddock space. It didn't really stick. It kind of just looked like it had come out of a Dexter set. Just this nasty maroon paint all over everything. That was butt terrible. However, it was somehow less butt terrible than their paint the following weekend at New Hampshire. We will cover that in our next wrap-up.
But terrible, this SVT Focus. Let me just say about SVT Focuses too. Everybody thinks that they've found the loophole and they're going to walk. They're terrible. Those cars have never done anything other than break hearts. That's why I love to see them. Anyway, these guys showed up with a "Don't Tread on Me" flag theme, leading into a very obvious penalty after they'd acquired a whole bunch of black flags.
But terrible at this race, and all races, Plymouth Dusters. These are just awful cars.
Okay, before we go any further, I have to talk about the overall winners of the race. Now, we've talked about this car before. The Boneyard Butchers have this crashed Saturn Sky. The whole rear end of the car was wiped out. And they spliced a Chevy Colorado pickup truck rear end on the thing. It looks gorgeous. It's got 3,000 hours worth of labor in it. Fantastic. And everybody is just furious. Like, what? That is an outrage. And our position on things like this has always been really clear. Look, you can bring some super hot, roddy, fancy 3,000 hour car. That's fine. We don't care because they always blow up. They never finish. As soon as you try to get that clever, stuff is flying out the sides, the car is spinning around, and it totally doesn't work.
A lot of people with impressive sounding credentials in this country are frauds. They have no idea what they're doing.
Okay, so we kind of got that wrong. I'll own that. Then they did sort of dominate. However, it was not without drama. So on Saturday, their GM power steering blew up because General Motors. They were off the track at the very end. They couldn't wrestle the thing anymore. The car would not steer. So they spent all night driving all over the Midwest to try to find parts for this thing. They finally found all the parts. They worked on it all night long, no sleep. They got the car back out, still without power steering, but at least they had a working steering rack that when you did this, the car would change directions. And they fought that thing all day Sunday to hang on to the win. It was pretty great, and they deserved it.
That brings us to the heroic fix, and we've given this award to Dirty Mike and the boys before, namely because at every single race they end up blowing up their 350, which is actually a 383, and putting in an old 305 from a Chevy Monte Carlo instead. That didn't happen this time. This time they had complete brake failure headed into the final corner at Gingerman. The driver somehow made it onto the pit road, figured that Gingerman's uphill pit lane would slow him down. Totally didn't happen. Could have gone straight onto the track and just kept going. Decided instead, I'll pull into the paddock. Not a great move because you go back down the hill at Gingerman. So he comes ripping through the paddock at about 30 miles an hour. We all start waving our hands and yelling at him to slow down. And then we see his eyes like saucers, panicking. And at the bottom of the hill, there was a paddock space full of people staring at this car coming at them. The guy intelligently, as much as we can give them credit for being intelligent, racing an RX-7, put it into the wall instead of flying through there. We figured we'd seen the last of them. At that point, the whole front suspension was bent out. All the bodywork was messed up. They managed to fix all that stuff and put it back on the track the next day. We thought that and, the part about not squishing all the people at the bottom of the hill was pretty heroic. Good job, Dirty Mike and the boys. Heroic fix.
Yeah, I Got Screwed trophy went to, there's another great team name right here. 4 engineers and an accountant walk into a bar. What a great team name. Unfortunately, their car was not nearly as great as their name. So this is a 300ZX. They got an X drift car. That never works. I think we've seen 100 of these things. They never pass tech. They never run. This car didn't do either one of those things successfully until Sunday afternoon they finally got it running. Then they got towed in way more often than they cross start finish. They got lapped. But they did have a pretty excellent theme. Their theme was the Carlos Ghosn Escape from Japan theme. I'm sure you guys all know this is the former head of Renault Nissan. He was indicted in Japan. He was spirited away in like a laundry basket like The Great Escape. Anyway, this was their theme. Brilliant. We've been waiting for this. They did a great job.
The regional trophy for this race is the We Can't Believe That Didn't Work trophy, which went to Balam's Donkey Racing, which is a great name. We'll let you guys Google that. We've seen these guys before. They run a junkyard somewhere in northern Wisconsin or Minnesota, and their attitude when they built this car originally was, well, this is a Mercedes compressor with 2.3 liters. What else has 2.3 liters? Oh, look, a Pinto motor. So they put that in it. It ran about as well as any other Pinto, which is to say, not at all. Now, this time around, they decided that things were going to be different. They were going to build the hot Pinto setup, which is to put a Volvo twin cam head on it, for some reason the coolant passages line up. All you have to do is weld a couple things, and then boom, you have 1,000,000 horsepower. Just to keep it properly mishmashed, they ran some kind of weird Chevy ignition module on it. Did it all work? Well, it made a lot of noise, and then it didn't make any noise. But for all the extraordinary effort that they put in to make a Mercedes C230 as good as a Ford Pinto, we gave them the "we can't believe that didn't work" trophy.
Judge's choice went to 43 Team Short Cart. This race was full of great names. So these guys, they pulled a car out. We think it maybe ran one race in like 2010. I mean, we don't know where the hell this thing came from, but it had been sitting for a decade. And they just pulled it out and said, this is going to be great. And it kind of was great. I mean, it was incredibly slow, but they made a fabulous Superbird theme out of, and I'm not kidding about this, old refrigerator parts that they found on the side of the road. And they just ran all weekend and had a great attitude.
Organizers' choice of this race went to Bad Decisions Racing and their kind of a Chevy Camaro. We've seen these guys over the years. They've brought all kinds of horrible things to race, including a 1947 Plymouth. Now that car, you can see in Lemon's World episode 48, has a GM V6 in it. They originally ran it with the Flathead 6 that had come in the Plymouth. Now you may ask yourself, what happens to the engines in these cars when they swap them? Well, Bad Decisions decided they needed the two-car mishmash, so they took the V6 out of the Camaro, they put it into the Plymouth, they took the Plymouth motor, and they put it into the Camaro. This is a 1947 Flathead in a Camaro. It was somehow even heavier, somehow handled worse than a normal Camaro, had about 8 horsepower, and it ran all weekend. We're going to do another Lemon's World episode on this one. It was amazing, and suffice to say, it took a ton of work to make a car go incredibly slow.
And that just takes us to the index of effluency, and I love this car. Brown rubber sole. Well, they brought a couple of cars. They won B in their Pro, but they also brought an 81 rear drive 626. Now, these are incredibly slow and terrible cars, however, super cool. They drove it all the way to the track, and again, we love it when people drive the car to the track. They raced all weekend, and it actually did really well. You know, it circulated the track. It beat a whole bunch of better teams. It just ran around and around, and they got to the checkered flag. It was still running great. So they were able to drive it back home. Sort of. Actually, the wheel bearings finally packed up halfway home. The team captain had to park it at another teammate's house in Iowa, and the next morning, that teammate's wife came out to the garage with a cup of coffee and literally yelled, "What the f*** is this?" Here's Lemons in a nutshell.
As I was coming down the back toward turn 11, my heart attacked because I realized that I had no brakes. When I hit pit in, I actually hit it. My underwear, I thought I hit it. The teams there fueling all did double takes. At the top of pit lane, I rounded the corner. The workers up there all thought they were goners as I went flying round on just 2 tires. Then I was headed back down toward the tower. Speed limit there is 10 miles an hour. I flailed my arms to show that things were dire. Brake, 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 that car's unfit. Brake, 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 and if you can't, then you should quit. Just tell Judge Eric on the judgment date that you just tried to drive it straight, but it's another Lemon's losing piece of So into the paddock I started careening. Women were running, men were screaming. The emergency brake, it did not do a thing. I went for the guardrail because I was desperate. I ground to a halt as I scraped up against it. At least I'll make that song that Mary sings. Break, break, break that RX-7. Break, 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 'cause if you can't, you'll go to heaven. Please find the ghost of Tony Swan and tell him even though he's gone, we're still coming up with brand new race transgressions. Thanks. Never say die. I love you guys. Miss you. I'll see you next year. Bye.